This daily drawing exercise is a great subject to practice our perspective angles and our placement of regular features. And by regular, I simply mean things such as these windows that line up in some way, either horizontally and or vertically. And to do that, keeping the overall proportions of the windows, of the spaces between the windows and doors, and of the walls of the building, and of one wall to another wall, particularly when we have a corner such as this and we can see two sides of the building at once. We want to keep the right proportion from one side of the building to the other. So in that respect, there's a great deal we can practice and benefit from in this. And while this did take me 20 minutes to do, and the first 10 minutes are in real time, and then we speed up quite considerably for the last section, which is mostly the right-hand side, this can be, I think, very usefully simplified into really just working on the bare bones of the walls, the angles, and the windows and the doors, and not worrying about hatching or depth lines and such things, but really just breaking it down to a focus on proportions accurately, perspective angles accurately. For a daily drawing exercise, we don't have to complete the drawing, and we can often get more advantage by doing more in less time, but focusing on a particular skill, such as the perspective angles, the proportions, the alignment. So I think it's helpful to be aware of that when we're trying to do something daily in our drawing. But at this point, I'm still going to do something more than that in this. I'm using a 0.2 millimeter pen, and I decided after I finished drawing this that I'm going to replace the nib and the ink. This is actually the second 0.2 millimeter pen that I picked up to use. The first one was in even worse ink and nib condition than this one. So I have a bit of pen housekeeping to do after I finish this video. One of the reasons though I like using these refillable pens is that I can have the refilling supplies on hand, so that if the pen runs out or becomes unsuitable in some way, I'm not forced to stop my drawing session and go to the shop. Now, all the perspective lines have to line up, and that includes things such as crossbars on windows. The horizontal alignment that they have in life needs to follow whatever perspective pattern the horizontal lines on the building are following at that point. Now, while this is in real time, when the video speeds up, for the last part of it, you can use the cog icon to reduce it to half video speed, which will bring it back to double my actual drawing time. I'm not going to get over involved in hatching on this. I'm not going to be hatching the shade on the left-hand side, and I'm not going to be hatching the shadow cast on the front, on the facade, and also on the roadway. But one thing I think that's worth noticing, because I think this is a good example of it, is if you look at the shade that's on the left-hand side of the building, and then you look at the shadow that's being cast by the awning, you can see that the shadow being cast by the awning is darker than the shade being cast on the left side of the building. And on the left side of the building, where part of that building is in shade and shadow, it's darker than where it's merely in shade. This is a great distinction to be aware of, because it helps us to see more accurately what we're looking at. And while in this particular drawing, it's probably wouldn't have made a great difference as to how I hatched those parts if I was going to do that. In some drawings, it does have a very significant impact on the values that I apply to certain parts. I do have a video on the difference between shade and shadow, and there are also some colour considerations as well. If you'd like to find that, then just search my videos on, if you put shade and shadow in, it will probably come up into the search, YouTube search field for my video. So there is a downhill slope going off to the left, but there is also a perspective angle that actually slopes upwards slightly. That is the horizontal line. So I'm going to put that in because the two large windows down that side line up with that horizontal line, not the sloping ground level line. Always important to be aware of ground level and to consciously work out, is it parallel to the horizontal lines of the building, or is there an adjustment that the builders have had to make at ground level to allow for ground sloping up or downhill? This downpipe here, one of the valuable parts, I think, of one of the valuable lessons of doing a drawing such as this, where there are things such as these awnings and the telegraph pole, is simply to work out the best order in which to draw things. If we want to draw freehand, so we have no guidelines that we erase, if every mark that we put on our paper is going to be there at the end, then we have to start to learn the best order in which, for us and for the way we draw and the sort of drawing we want to have at the end, the best way to choose what we draw first and how we draw it. And also simply to get used to the process of observing carefully enough and observing when we first look at our scene to draw it, to partly be observing what will I have to draw first, to be able to anticipate, well, if I draw this and then this, then that could be a problem. So I need to maybe draw that sooner. And again, this is where these daily exercises, I think, are really invaluable, because we get to sort out this technique side of drawing, this what order do I draw things to make sure that I don't end up running ink lines where I don't want them, that are going to go through things in effect and look see-through. And sometimes that's unavoidable, or it just happens and we can hide it. But other times it may not be so hard to hide, where we've not anticipated something being in front of something else. So it's another great little result of these exercises, that we get to practice things such as that without the pressure of, I don't want to ruin this artwork. These are daily drawing exercises, so that gives us freedom to be experimental with them. So we're starting to get a bit closer to the 10 minutes being up. I do continue the rest of this drawing in this way. And I think when we draw a building such as this from a photo, where it is something which is some distance away, so there really isn't any vertical distortion with perspective, it actually is quite good practice for location sketching if we can't go out on location. Because if I were to sit across the intersection, this building would look exactly the same as this. And so by drawing it directly in ink, I'm also echoing the technique. I'm also using the technique that I would use to draw it if I were on location. And therefore, except for the fact that I can be more comfortable sitting at the desk and probably have more even lighting and not be as cold at this time of year anyway, it otherwise is not that different, the process that I'm using sitting at the desk to the one I would use sitting across the intersection. So therefore it is good practice. It is good practice if this is what I'm like, if I want to do locations, if I'd like to improve my location sketching skills. And this is actually why I started drawing freehand in ink scenes such as this in preparation for a trip that finished up being cancelled by COVID. But I'm really glad I did, because it's also a really fun way to draw. I feel much more connected with the scenes doing it this way than labouring with excessive care to try and get every detail right, but instead to try and capture a feel with the scene. Now, as you can see, we've sped up to 4 times drawing speed. So, as I said, you can reduce it. You can slow it down if you want, but in many ways it is more of the same. And if you're finding this helpful, if you're finding this series or my videos generally helpful, then please, can you hit the like button for me? It really does make a difference, and maybe even put on notifications. Now, getting the top of the roof right. Now, working out the roof so that the chimneys sit on top, and again, we don't have lines in the wrong places between the roof lines and the chimney lines, is another one of those little practice things that we can improve on by doing these daily exercises. Every time we make a mistake, every time we get it wrong, we're that much closer to getting it right the next time, to learning finally to observe, to learn finally the best order for our way of drawing. Because it does depend a bit on our technique, on the way we like to start and progress our drawings. So the way someone else goes, what things they draw first and second and third and so forth, can really vary from artist to artist. I don't normally put telegraph lines in my drawings. They don't often normally come up, but I felt here that they were actually quite a good contextual item to include. And they do, I think, also convey the sense of New South Wales country town as well, where there are often lots of very prominent telegraph wires, reflecting an older technology in the centre of these towns. This actually is a city, not a town. So here we go. Put a few wires in. Wishing my pen was a little more free-flowing doing these wires, but never mind. And of course, you'll find this photo on my channel community page if you'd like to have a go drawing it yourself. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Well, I had a bit of fun revisiting this country town that I visited a few months ago and drawing this, and I hope you give it a go too. In many ways, it's a great daily drawing exercise. But whatever you end up drawing, however you draw it, with a pen on its last legs or not, make sure you have fun. I certainly did. I'll see you next video. Bye.